Hello, and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg, and I am here today to do a book haul revisit for the month of February. This is where I look back at 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and see what books I brought into my library in the month of February in this case, and how many books I have read, how many books I still want to read, if there are any books that I have gotten rid of already, and kind of think about whether or not there are any books that are sort of on the chopping block or that I might be thinking about getting rid of or unhauling. So there are 3 Februaries that I'm going to look at in this video. The first is February of 2022. We're going to start with the most recent one and then go backwards. Then we'll do February of 2021, and then we will close with February of 2020. And I am not going to spend a lot of time talking about what these books are about. So if you are interested or want to know more about what each book is about, I will have links to all of the individual book hauls down below. I would encourage you to check those out because in those, I spend a lot more time doing that, talking about what these books are about and even reading a little bit from the opening of the book itself. So we're going to start with February of 2022. As I said, I brought 8 books into my library that year, 1 year ago. And the first one is Tin Man by Sarah Winman, which I have not read, but which I always want to play with when I pick it up because it has this fun cover that kind of shimmers in the light. I don't know if you can see it. I hope you can see it because I keep playing with it. Like I said, I have not gotten around to reading this yet, but I still definitely want to. I have actually not read Still Life by Sarah Winman, which I also have on my shelf. And I think I had hauled that. It was in my book haul revisit for last month, I think. And somebody commented and said, if I could convince you to read one book in your library, it would be Still Life. So that really makes me want to get to Sarah Winman more. I still think I might want to start with Tin Man, although now I'm really considering Still Life. So if you have advice on which book I should probably do first, I do definitely want to try to get to this year, and Still Life as well. Maybe I'll try to make that happen. This also has a really kind of soft cover that's fun to touch as well. It's just a fun book to handle for a lot of different reasons. If I haven't gotten to this by June, it is a prime candidate for my pile of possibilities for Pride Month. And we'll see. It doesn't look like it's that big of a book either. So hopefully it would be pretty easy to fit in as well. It's 213 pages. That's really not bad. So hopefully I will fit that in this year. And then the next book is actually something I unhauled like 3 days ago. It's The 30 Names of Night by Zeyn Joukhadar. I did read this book. I crammed it in 2022. It was the last book that I finished in 2022. And I had been thinking that because I was cramming it in and because it's a bit out of the area that I would usually read in, maybe I didn't give the book a very fair chance. I had a really hard time getting into it. I basically dragged myself through it and across the finish line to get it done in 2022. And I speculated in my wrap-up video for that month that maybe I hadn't given it a fair chance, but a bunch of people commented and said that they either read this book or other writings of Zeyn Joukhadar and had a similar experience, and that kind of convinced me that maybe this isn't something I would revisit at any point. And then because I just didn't really enjoy it, it didn't make sense to keep it on my shelf. Plus, I was out of credit at my local used bookstore, and I wanted some, and I immediately cashed it in. So I just picked a handful of books off of my new library shelves and brought them in, and so it's gone now. But I did read it before it went, so that's something, I guess. And the next book is Don't Cry for Me by Daniel Black. I did read this. I loved it. It was one of my favorite reads of 2022. It was Joel's favorite book of 2022. I'll link the video where we talk about our favorites down below as well. I love this book. I feel like not enough people have discovered this book or are talking about this book. So I would encourage you to check it out, see if it might be something you would be interested in, and hopefully you will love it as much as I did because I thought it was just absolutely fantastic. And I hope more people will discover it and love it as much as I did. The next book is Alec by William de Canzio. And I have not read this one yet, but I'm hoping that I will make it happen this year because I am participating in the E.M. Forster read-along with Jen the Librarian, and one of the prompts later in the year is to read books that are either adapted from or sequels to E.M. Forster books, and this is a sort of sequel to Maurice, or Morris if you're in the UK, which is probably my favorite book of all time. I've heard some mixed things about this book, but I have heard positive things from people whose opinion on books I trust pretty well. So I'm still going to go in. I'm still going to give it a shot, and hopefully it will happen this year. I want to read Morris first, and that will be at some point later this year. I can't remember the exact schedule of events, but I'll put a link to the information about the E.M. Forster read-along down below if you would like to check it out as well. But this is something I will hopefully be getting to as part of that. In What Is Time news, 1 year ago, I got Amanda Gorman's Call Us What We Carry. I think this book had been out for at least a little bit before then, but because the inauguration that made her famous was like 2 years ago, it just feels like this should have been something that I hauled a lot longer ago than February of 2022. But, anyway, I did read it. So that was good. I included it as a prompt for the Montana Book Company's Reading Challenge for 2022, and I liked it. I don't read a lot of poetry, so I was happy that I managed to get a copy of this and fit it in, and I still love Amanda Gorman. The next book is What the Fireflies Knew by Kai Harris. I have not read this one, and I kind of knew I didn't have any immediate plans to get to it. I admit I purchased this. Well, I was still a Book of the Month member at that time, as you can see, and I had a credit and I wanted to use it. So there's that aspect. And actually, I pretty much decided at this point, my membership with Book of the Month is on hold, but I pretty much have decided that I'm going to let it go because I've noticed in book haul revisits that a lot of the books that are just sitting on my shelf and I don't really have any intention to get to are things I got from Book of the Month. So this is kind of in that, but mostly I got it because I wanted to, it did sound interesting, but I wanted to support Tiny Rip Books, who is the publisher. That is an imprint of a larger publisher. I'm forgetting which. Maybe it will say in the front of the book, if I can turn pages. It's a division of Penguin Random House. And it was started by Phoebe Robinson, who is a comedian that I like and follow. And I really like the mission of this publishing house. Basically, it seeks to diversify and amplify the publishing industry and amplify diverse voices within the publishing industry, people who might have traditionally had a difficult time finding a publisher and getting their stories out there. And I love that. And this was their second book. The first was actually by Phoebe Robinson herself. And I love that. So I wanted to support her new imprint. The book does sound really interesting. I will say, if I haven't gotten to it at this point next year, I might be starting to think about an unhaul. But since we did the new library, I'm not hurting for space. So unless I desperately want credit at my local used bookstore, like what happened with the 30 Names of Night, I'm not feeling a need to make space right now. So there's a chance that this could sit for a while. But if you've read it, let me know if I should prioritize it. Because right now I just don't have any plans to get to it anytime soon. Then we have Waiting for Eden by Elliot Ackerman. This was recommended to me by Chelsea from the Montana Book Company, and I grabbed it because she's been pretty reliable for me in the past, and I am still wanting to read it. It's a tiny little thing. I think it's less than 200 pages. It is. It is only 125 pages. So this should be a pretty easy thing to fit in at some point, and I would like to do that. So I haven't gotten to it yet, but it should be pretty easy to fit in. I say that, but there's a good chance that by this time next year I will not have read it. But even if it's still here next year and I have not read it, it's not going to go anywhere. I trust Chelsea. And the final book for February of 2022 is Gordo, Stories by Jamie Cortez. I really wanted to fit this in 2022 and did not get a chance to do it. I'm hoping I will manage to do it this year. Right now, it is sort of mentally bookmarked for my pile of possibilities for Pride Month. I would love to get this in June, if nowhere else. So I still definitely want to read this book. It's not going anywhere. And I'll get to it at some point. I'm hoping June. But we'll see how that goes. So of the 8 books from February of 2022, I've read 3, and I unhauled 1. And that one book, The 30 Names of Night, I had read before I unhauled it. So let's go to February of 2021. The first book on that list is The Last Picture Show by Larry McMurtry. I read Lonesome Dove as part of my Pulitzer Prize project, where I'm trying to read all of the books that have won a Pulitzer Prize for fiction, and I loved it. I loved it a lot. And it's a big brick of a book, but it really made me curious to read more books by Larry McMurtry. I also have a copy of Terms of Endearment on my shelf. I think it is this right there. Doesn't really matter, but that should be it. I think the book of his that I would be most likely to get to next would be The Last Picture Show. Now, I saw the movie a long time ago and remember really liking it, but I've never read the book. And this feels like the book of his that's just interests me or intrigues me the most, especially with Lonesome Dove being such a commentary on myth making in the Old West. This kind of fits in with that vibe. So I definitely still want to read this book at some point. I found that I love kind of vintagey book designs, and I saw this in my local used bookstore and couldn't really resist. So it came home with me. Then there's This Brutal House by Niven Govinden. I have not managed to read this yet. I hauled this book because of Jen the Librarian. She talked about it on her channel. It sounded fascinating and interesting and all of that. So I actually ordered it from the UK because it was not available in the US. I don't know if it's now available in the US because I haven't needed to look for it because I ordered it from the UK. And then Jen read it and didn't finish it because she didn't like it. I'm still interested in giving it a try for myself. It does sound like a really interesting book. But I think the fact that she didn't finish it has made me hold off a little bit. I would still like to get to it. And if you have read this, please let me know what you thought of it in the comment section down below, because I think I would prioritize other things ahead of this for my pile of possibilities for Pride Month in June. But if you want to make a case for whether or not I should try to prioritize it, let me know in the comment section down below. In the meantime, it's kind of in a weird limbo phase right now. Then we have The Inland Sea by Madeleine Watts. This was one of my most anticipated books of 2021. I did not get around to reading it. I am still kind of interested. If my plate is clear in April, I would probably read it for Aussie April. We'll see how that goes. It does still sound interesting. I do think I would like to read it. If I haven't gotten to it by next year, I might be starting to think about an unhaul. The W section, where Madeleine Watts obviously stays, is already getting pretty tight in the new library. So there are danger signs. I am still very interested in the book. I'm just thinking that if I haven't gotten to it by this time next year, it might be ready for an unhaul. But I would still like to read it. And again, if you'd like to make a case for why I should prioritize this book or hold on to it until I get to it, let me know in the comment section down below. Then we get to Mike Nichols' A Life by Mark Harris. I love Mark Harris. Back in the glory days when Twitter was not a nightmare cesspool. Well, it was always a nightmare cesspool, to be honest. But before Elon Musk made it worse, I love following Mark Harris, and he was a journalist at Entertainment Weekly back at the glory days of Entertainment Weekly when I was a subscriber, and I've just followed him ever since. He published and wrote one of my favorite nonfiction books, which is Pictures at a Revolution, and I haven't read his other two books, which include this biography of Mike Nichols, but this actually grew out of Pictures at a Revolution. So Pictures at a Revolution is about the 5 Best Picture nominees from 1967. One of those was The Graduate. So doing the research for that book led to the existence of this book. And I do feel like I'm much more likely to read this on audio. I did kind of know that when I purchased this book, but I wanted to support Mark Harris because he is a journalist and a writer that I really deeply appreciate. So I have no regrets for having done that. The next book on this list actually was, I'm jumping ahead. The next one was an unhaul. It's Girl A by Abigail Dean. This was another book of the month purchase, and I have not really enjoyed mystery thrillers a lot recently, so I kind of thought about it, and I'm worried that there was potential for it to lean into all of the mystery thriller tropes that I have not liked about the mystery thriller industry lately. So I had a hard think about whether or not I was likely to read it. And then I thought to myself, I would probably do this on audio anyway. So I kind of just got rid of the book. That was in the time when I was having a huge crunch for space in my library in the before times, before I had all of this extra space. Last summer, I really had a crisis where I couldn't fit anything in. So I needed to make a lot of tough decisions, and that was one of them. And it wasn't as tough because, like I said, I feel like if I were to read Girl A, I would probably do it on audio. I've dumped on Book of the Month Club a fair amount already. So let's talk about a success story with that. It's The Bad Muslim Discount by Syed M. Masood. I loved this book. It was one of my favorite reads of 2021. I would definitely encourage you to check this book out as well, because again, this is something that I feel like not enough people really talk about and have discovered. So I would encourage you to seek this book out. And if it sounds interesting to you, think about getting a copy. And hopefully you will like it every bit as much as I did, because I thought it was absolutely, absolutely fantastic. That takes us to Infinite Country by Patricia Engel. I did finally get around to reading this. I ultimately listened to it on audio, which feels disappointing because it's a slim book. It should have been easy to fit in. But I really liked this. I liked this a lot. And actually, Patricia Engel just released I think it's a short story collection. And I'm really looking forward to that as well. So this is another success story in my book haul revisit. I got to take the wins where I can get them, because there are a lot more books that I haven't read than there are that I have. So that was it for February of 2021. I had hauled 7 books in February of 2021. I have read 2. Those were The Bad Muslim Discount and Infinite Country, and I've only unhauled 1, and that was Girl A by Abigail Dean, which takes us to the smallest of all of the book hauls, which is actually atypical. Usually the book hauls get larger as you go back in time, and as I've been doing book haul revisits, the book haul's been getting shrinking, although that's not true the last 2 months. And maybe not even for February either, because since I have all of this space, I've gone a little bit crazy, and I need to start reining that in again. So there are only 4 books that I brought into my library in February of 2020. The first is a book of poetry, My Alexandria, Poems by Mark Doty. I did read this not long after I purchased it, and I loved it. I kind of struggle with poetry. I am always worried that I'm not going to understand it, and for that reason, I kind of hold off and don't do a whole lot of it, but I always kind of want to dip my toe back in the water and try again. So this was a success story. I felt like I just really liked this book. It was published a long time ago, and I think at that time I purchased it, I really wanted to give poetry a try. So I had asked people to recommend poetry books to me. And the book that was recommended the most was actually Mark Doty. Well, no specific book, just Mark Doty in general. And this was the one that I picked out. It was originally published in 1993, still holds up. I would absolutely recommend this to you. I'm not an authority on poetry, but clearly a lot of people had recommended him to me. So other people who might be more authorities on poetry clearly gave their stamp of approval, and I really liked this a lot, so I would recommend it to you. Another book of the month book, The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abby Dare or Daré. I don't know how to pronounce that name. I'm sorry, and I didn't look it up. I was really looking forward to reading this when I first got it, and it has just kind of sat on my shelf, and I feel like it has just sunk further and further and further down my priority list. And every time I mention it, people comment and tell me that I should read it, that they really liked it. And it just continues to sit there, and I don't know what to do about that. So I still want to read it. I'm not going to get rid of it. But the longer it sits, the more dangerous it gets, I guess, although I do have all this extra space right now, especially I'm not hurting for any space in either of these first 2 shelves. So we'll see. Actually, I'm kind of curious. If you have listened to the audio of this book, let me know how it is, because I feel like at this point, I'm much more likely to try to fit in the audio than I am to try to get to the book, because my reading priorities have changed so much since February of 2020. And unfortunately, it's a book that I'm still interested in, but it's just gotten low on that list of priorities. The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea is by, I want to say, Yukio Mishima. They don't give the first name. Yeah, it's Yukio Mishima, translated from the Japanese by John Nathan. I was really obsessed with these vintage Japan editions of books back then, and this was one of the ones that I had ordered. However, they only give you part of the name, and they don't tell you the translator unless you open it up, which is a little annoying. But they're so pretty. They're so pretty. And they have these little designs on the inside, hidden by the French flaps. They're just stunning books. So this was one of the ones I ordered. I have not read it, but in my defense, I ordered it as kind of a library builder. I didn't have immediate plans to get to it. I just kind of thought it would be pretty on my shelf. I know that's a little shallow, but there it is. And also, because it is a book that is sort of a classic and that people tend to talk about, I would have it on my shelf. I love the idea of having library builders, things that you can have on your shelf, and when you get to them, you get to them. And that is this to a T. And that is actually the next book as well, which is another one of the vintage Japan books, The Makioka Sisters. It is by Junichiro Tanizaki, translated from the Japanese by Edward G. Seidensticker. And again, just a beautiful really stunning edition of the book. I have seen other editions. Again, look at the French flaps, or the inside of the French flaps. It's just a beautifully put together book. I've seen a lot of other editions, but this is the one that to me is just the prettiest. So I kind of had to have it. And it's a brick of a book, but I know I would like to read this at some point. I've heard a lot of really, really good things about it. And I did not have immediate plans to get to it in February of 2020, but that was fine. This was another library builder, just like The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea. I would like to get, I feel like I would be more likely to get to the Makioka sisters before I'd get to the Mishima, even though it's like triple, maybe even 4 times the size. Yeah, but I've heard a lot of really good things about it, and it's pretty, and it sits very pretty on my shelves. And I admit, especially when I'm working, I can see it right here, and it catches my eye a fair amount. So it's nice for that as well. So in February of 2020, I brought 4 books into my library, obviously. Unfortunately, I haven't read... actually, that's not true. I noted this down incorrectly. I said I didn't read any out of the 4, but I did, because I read my Alexandria. And there have been no unhauls. And the one that's closest to an unhaul is The Girl with the Louding Voice, but it's not actually that close, because maybe if it's still here at this time next year and I haven't read it, then we would be talking about it. So if the rest of my math is correct, that means that overall I brought 19 books into my library in the last 3 Februaries, and I've read 5, which is not great. But there are some library builders in here. There are some books that I'm definitely still hoping to get to, and then there are some that I might have to start thinking about getting rid of, but I'm doing okay for now. And overall, I've only gotten rid of 2 out of the 19 books, which is pretty good so far. And I did read one of those books before I got rid of it. So that is everything I brought into my library over the last 3 Februaries. I would love to hear your feedback on any of these books. Any book that you think I should prioritize, any book you think I should let go, recommendations based on my interest in all of these books. Let me know in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.